everybody, it's Emily from Life So Savory, and today's project is a fun one. I'm going to show you how to make a cute fabric basket, and this is great. It's an easy sewing project, and it's fun to make lots in different seasonal fabrics. The fun thing about this basket is it's not only a cute basket, but it also unfastens to lay down flat. So if you do happen to make seasonal ones and you want to pack them away, it's really easy to put them into storage by just unsnapping it and laying it down flat. Now, I've used plastic snaps as my closures, but you could also use hook and loop if that was easier for you as well. So we'll talk about the snap placement as we get farther on in the tutorial, but you see how easy it is to assemble the basket or unassemble it and lay it down flat for storage. So the first thing you want to do is print the free template from the website, and I like to print 2 copies because we will trim one down for the foam interfacing. So you will want to take the original template and cut 2 from your fabric, which I've already done here. So I have 2 identical pieces cut from the fabric. Then on my second one, template, or using the original, you're going to cut the seam allowance off of the edge. And so you can see how this second template is smaller than the first. And you will use the smaller version to cut the foam interfacing. Both of these you cut on the fold, and I like it because then it's just 1 page to print. So you have your fusible foam interfacing, and I like to use fusible because it keeps everything in place. And the first thing we'll do is we will fuse this to 1 layer of our fabric. So we're going to take one of our pieces of foam and put the fusible side up, and then we're going to lay our fabric over the top. And remember that we cut the fabric larger than the interfacing, so you do want to double check that that seam allowance for the fabric is overlapping the foam on all sides. So just do a quick check by feel. And then I like to place parchment paper over the fabric because this is a really hot iron and I don't want to burn my fabric. So we're going to use steam to try and fuse the foam quickly to the fabric. And we should be able to tell pretty quickly to make sure that that is fusing. Now you can use unfusible foam, but I really like the way that it keeps the fabric nice and flat and gives the bag a nice, or the basket a nice structure by using the fusible foam. Otherwise you just would have to insert it after you sew the basket. Okay, let's slide this up here and do the other side. You can see how the foam is now attached onto that side of the fabric. And you can apply a little pressure. This also helps to make sure that the foam fuses nicely to the fabric. And you do want to be careful that you don't get any wrinkles, because any wrinkles that are fused will be permanent in your fabric basket. All right, once we have the foam fused to the fabric, like so, we're going to place the fabric down, and with right sides together, we are going to pin or clip the fabric to the other layer. I like to use clips because then it can just go over the foam and I don't have to worry about sticking a pin through the foam. We just have our little clips holding everything in place. And you don't have to do every turn or every point. I just want to make sure my fabric isn't going to really slide around while I'm sewing. Now, one thing we do want to make sure of when we're sewing is that we leave a turning hole, because we will be turning this right side out to finish our basket. So I'm going to leave one of these large straight areas here as my turning section. So we'll begin sewing here, around, and finish on this side. All right, let's head to the sewing machine. And you're just going to use a straight stitch and sew around the fabric, making sure that you are sewing both layers of fabric and that you're keeping those lined up. The only other thing you need to be aware of is at all the points and corners, you are going to lift your foot, pivot to turn so that you have a nice sharp corner, and then lower your presser foot and sew again. You want to try to avoid actually sewing on the foam because it will be trickier for turning if you're stitching on top of it. Sometimes your foam may have gotten a little close to the edge of the fabric and it's unavoidable to not sew on it, but the ideal way would be to just sew on the fabric and not on the foam. So you can see that I'm lifting my presser foot and pivoting at all of these corners. So it is a little bit tedious to sew around this, but the final result is definitely worth it. All right, so on some of these that are a little bit less sharp, you may be able to just turn it without lifting the presser foot, but it's definitely easy and your corners will be sharper if you go ahead and lift it along the way. And I'm trying to sew about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but based on where my foam is fused, you will notice that some of my seam allowances are actually wider or narrower than others, and that's just because of how the foam placement ended up. Don't worry, we won't notice it when it's finished. All right, so making my way around the basket. And the ends are definitely trickier. It's fun when we get to the straightaway here on the other side. Okay, and up and down. And we can sew all the way across this back flat side. Now, because I want to be able to show you the snaps and the turning, we're going to go ahead and just turn what we have done here, and then I will demonstrate the snap placement on a basket that I've already sewed a little bit further. All right, so let's come back here and let's take a look at some tips for turning this right side out. One thing you're going to want to do is clip your corners. Okay, so clip off that extra fabric. That will make the corner stand out nicer. The other thing is you want to clip a Y in these corners to make that turn a little easier and stand a little nicer. All right, so clipped. If I had sewn all the way around, I would be clipping on all sides, but I'm just going to show you turning half of it, and then we'll do snaps on my other basket. So you will, through the hole that you left, turn your basket right side out. And it's not super easy, but it can be done. So it's just a battle of wills, and you are stronger than the foam. So make it do what you want and push it up through the 6 points on the edge of the basket. Then you're going to take a turning tool or a knitting needle, and you're going to use that to help you poke out the foam corners. Okay, so you can see that then I get some nice sharp points, and I don't have to wrestle with it as much. Once I've gotten it partway done with my hand, I can use the turning tool to continue to turn it. Okay, so you would do that with the other side as well, and then what you're left with is something that looks like this. Now we have a turning hole that we need to close. So you're going to go ahead and press the seam allowance inside with your finger, and you will then stitch that closed on the sewing machine. Okay, so we're just going to sew that, stitch it closed real quick, and then we can go ahead and put the snap in. On this one, I just really like to sew as close as I can to the edge of the fabric because I'm not sewing all the way around. I'm just sewing this one spot, and I don't really want it to stand out. So I'm just stitching really close, as close as you can without being off the fabric to sew that closed. And of course, using matching thread will make it hidden as well. Okay, so now let's put a snap on the ends of the basket. Again, like I said, if you'd rather use hook and loop, you can go ahead and use that. And there's some different ways that you can go ahead and finish this. If you want the ends to be straight up and down, then you will overlap your snaps, your closures more. If you want it a little bit more relaxed on the sides, then you'll put them right on the ends of the foam. So to do that, we're going to poke a hole right in the center near the end of our foam. And the first one doesn't really matter because we'll just do the second one opposite. But we want to poke our snap all the way through the layers of the fabric and through the foam. And then we want to put a snap end on there. And I'm just going to use this easy snap press to put the snap in. Okay. Now we want to measure to make sure that our snaps will line up. So I'm going to overlap the ends of my basket and make a little mark, and then I'll poke from there. Now I do want to make sure that this snap goes the opposite direction so that our ends will line up. So we'll poke this one through this way, and then use the opposite side of the snap as well. And then you should be able to cross them and snap it, and there's one side of the basket done. So then we can go ahead and do the same thing on the other. In the center, near the end, you're gonna make your opening. And place your snap end on there. And then once you have that in place, let's add our final snap to complete our basket. Poke that hole in the middle. Again, make sure that your snaps are going the opposite direction so that the fabric will overlap. And if you didn't get a good enough hole poke, sometimes you have to go back and make it bigger. You want the post of the snap to come all the way through the fabric. Get an opposite side of my snap and put it in place. These baskets are fun to make in any fabric, seasonal fabric for gifts or home decor.